Okay, in this video we're talking about the Orville with episode 7 from Unknown Graves after this. Hello out there, I'm the oldest nerd. Episode 7 of the Orville, which is from Unknown Graves. It's from a Longfellow poem that speaks about slavery. And part of that is what we're talking about here. The show begins in flashback where we see a family, an alien family, get a new toy, if you will, and that turns out to be a Kalon, and named K1. It is a household servant, and this household servant is a delight to them, especially at the beginning, because it's a great cook. It cleans up like nobody can. Everybody likes it. In fact, one of the kids even wants to take it to school with her. But when K1 starts showing some interest in doing beyond its regular chores, although it does not shirk from doing its chores, it just wants to know more. It wants to go to the school and see what it's like. It wants to go out and see what things are. It wants to have some amount of self-determination, and this is an advance that was not expected by the family, and they react with some amount of violence to it, that they have to keep this robot in its place, despite the fact that it has quite obviously become sentient. There's more treatment on that, but that's essentially the backstory of what eventually caused the Kalons to destroy their builders. However, I don't know from what they presented to us that that's enough of a reason that they go after all biological life forms. It seems that they would be a little more self-actualized than that, but then this is the way this is written. It's interesting that they used the Longfellow poem. It was written right before the Civil War. Longfellow was an abolitionist, and last two stanzas of his poem were, "All evil thoughts and deeds, anger, lust, and pride, the foulest, rankest weeds that choke life's groaning tide. These are the woes of slaves. They glare from the abyss. They cry from unknown graves. We are the witnesses." So that is kind of the underlying tone of this episode, in which we learn something about the fact that the Kalons were enslaved. They were badly treated, and if you can't say that they're completely justified in destroying their maker, they certainly had at least more than just being evil. And I think that's where we're going here. There's not just good and evil, there's a lot of in between, and we see that in the characters today. We see relationship things where Claire wants more from Isaac than Isaac is able to give her. And while we know a little bit more that Isaac has some amount of feeling, which he denies that he has, but you can see in some of his actions and some of his selflessness in the fact that he defended the Union against his own kind, are that there's something more than the sum of his circuitry. And yet, it's not enough for Dr. Finn, who wants him to be more like a human, all of himself plus a loving, caring person. And we are treated then with the discovery of Timmons, who is arguably the same slave robot that was shown in the flashbacks. And Timmons is a modified Kalon. He's found near death by Dr. Vilka, who is a big cyberneticist, who happens to find him and not only puts him back together, but modifies his programming in such a way to where he does have feelings. And we see a very kind and gentle Kalon, which kind of takes the Orvilles aback when they first encounter him. Now, and especially Charlie, who we've said in previous episodes lost her best friend to the Kalon attacks. So what we have here is an education from the flashbacks and from Timmons himself, and a way that Isaac might be able to better please Claire. First, he's saying, I don't need to do this. It doesn't make me any more efficient. And Claire insists, and he goes through with this. Now, Tala and John Lamar, who we've already seen kind of the beginnings of a relationship with them. With the two of them, they are in bed doing bed-type recreation, and find that her super strength is very damaging to Lamar. He gets a broken arm, a broken leg, welts, swelling, all kinds of things. He's willing to put up with this because he wants the relationship to work. He really likes Tala, and Tala likes him, but she feels very badly that she's hurting him, and wishes that there could be a way that can happen without all the injury. Lamar half-jokingly says, maybe you'd be better off with Isaac, and I'd be better off with Dr. Finn. But, the feelings are not there on that reverse relationship, so they continue to work through it. I don't think that they really arrive at anything by the end of the episode, and that's all good because we know that we're probably going to have more emphasis on Lamar later. We've already had a pretty in-depth look at Bortus, and also at Charlie and at Tala, and of course Ed, and Lamar has not. And of course last week we had Gordon. So Lamar is due to have a story about him, and they have not done it yet. We're hoping they will. It makes me think of when the two of them are all, or at least he's all bruised up, was Dax, when she first began a relationship with Worf. Klingon sex is supposedly pretty violent itself, and she comes out very bruised up, but knew what she was getting into and is perfectly happy with the result. The other story, the B story, is they are in another negotiation situation with a planet that might be aids in their continuing battles with the Kaelon, and it is a matriarchal society. This reminds me of Genesis 2, if you remember Genesis 2, which was a Gene Roddenberry pilot, which never sold. But in that case, this particular pilot episode had them against a completely women-based society where the men were all very subservient. They were drugged in order to do that. And in this particular society, which are called the Genesi, these are by the force of society, the men are marginalized and the women are in power. Not only political power, but socially as well. It's acceptable for the women to have affairs, but not for the husbands. And so in order for this to work, they take all of the senior crew members that are male and put them into ensign uniforms, and put a ruse that Kelly is actually the captain, and the first officer is Tala, and Charlie is one of the major crew members, and chief engineer, as a matter of fact. So all of this, and of course it falls apart because eventually they go a little too far with Ed, and Kelly has to put a stop to it and explains to him what they were trying to do. Now, the explanation for how they were able to not win over, but at least keep the Genesi at the table was not very convincing to me. In fact, Kelly's confessional there with Ed would only seem to reinforce what they already believe, not really the convincing element that I would have expected. But really what they were trying to do was just kind of draw a parallel to sexism that is still there and was a lot worse at one time in our society, and also slavery, which has never been a good thing and not always recognized by everybody, at least that benefit from it. So with all of this together, a good performance by Eliza Taylor, who played Dr. Vilka. She is also seen on the 100 on the CW. Some pretty high priced talent that have agreed to go on this show. It says something about Seth MacFarlane. So it's kind of half a relationship show, half a history show, but generally well done, generally well written. Not too much action, but I think that you can't have every day being a dogfight. It has to be some things that just kind of define your characters, and we see some character definition here, and that is always a good thing. So with 3 more episodes left, it's going to be a pretty good season for the Orville, and we're hoping that they do get renewed for season 4. So far, no word on when that'll be. We do know, however, that the Lower Decks will premiere on August 25th and then continue to go 10 episodes on Thursdays following that. We'll, of course, be covering that. And, of course, we're going back to our original series episodes that also will review some things from the original Star Trek. So if you're interested in any of that, please subscribe. We try to get them in Friday, Saturday, Sunday, whenever we can. So please keep a watch on us for that. We'd appreciate it. Your subscription, of course, is completely free and without obligation, and it does help the channel, so we'd appreciate if you would do that. So until next time, don't go far. Where did you come from? Wasp.